Hey guys, it's Chris, and welcome to episode 1 of what I'm going to call, the smoke break. So what I'm doing here is something a little different. I haven't done this type of thing before. More of a podcast style, commentary style, little mini show that I can kind of break up into pieces for you guys, and see if you guys enjoy this type of thing. It would make it a lot easier on me to kind of sit down and record all this kind of stuff at one time. I can chop it up by timestamps in the description or whatever, and kind of go over all the major fandoms that we cover. And of course, I can change some in and out as we change fandoms as other shows come on, whatever. So if you watch this and you like this type of show where we can get into some more commentary stuff, and we can also go into other topics as well over time, let me know in the comments below for sure, and be sure to give me a like to let me know, and the algorithm for that matter, if you like this type of thing. So we'll be talking about, we'll have a segment on, the writing updates. We'll have a segment on Marvel, on Star Wars, movies, etc. And so I wanted to give this a shot. What's it going to hurt? I need to do something different here. I'll still be doing the one-off writing videos occasionally. I'm thinking about maybe moving that to a separate channel. Either way, I'll still be doing those one way or the other. We'll still be doing, individual show breakdowns and stuff like that as well. Like WandaVision, for example, we're covering that right now in the middle of that season. And we'll still be doing the live streams, and probably go back to more live streams as well on Sundays, at least on Sundays. Maybe actually more often. Maybe I'll do some of these live. So let me know in the comments what you think about this type of show once you get down to it. So I just want to let you know up front, that's kind of what's going on here, and I want to try something different. I think I would enjoy this style a little bit more as well. And it'll be a lot easier for me because I can also chop these up, for people who don't want to, for example, listen to the Marvel section or segment or whatever. Then you can kind of go over to the Star Wars or, The Witcher, if it's the Witcher season, or Game of Thrones. They seem to be doing almost a Game of Thrones cinematic universe or something. So we'll talk about that as well. But anyway, so really quickly, let me update everybody on the Crimson Gods. This is, if you're new here, my debut fantasy novel. It is done. I actually have a copy right here for those that hadn't seen this yet. This is the first actual printout here. If you can see this, I'll try to hold this up here. This is we're at 86,000 words. So there is my book. We're in the editing phase now. There is an Indiegogo campaign up and running now to help pay for the professional editing as well as the audiobook. Because we definitely want to have a proper voice actor to do that as well. So that is up and running now. So that's where we're at. We're kind of in a holding pattern because the editors were booked out so far. I'm going to do this the right way to make sure it's professionally edited at all phases. You have to do developmental editing, then you have to do the line and copy editing, and then proofreading, and then the book will be finalized, the page count will be finalized, and then I can tell the cover designer exactly how many pages there are and all that stuff. That has to be known down to every 2 pages or whatever it is to get the spine properly formatted as far as the cover designer. So that campaign is live, and I will leave that in the description below as well if you're interested. Probably in the pinned comment, I'm sure, as we try to get this first book out. I decided to go the self-publishing route for those that may not know, because it's more about control over everything. When you go the traditional route, it's certainly easier. You basically write the book and hand it off, but they have all the control over, the cover design, what it's going to look like, maybe even the title in some cases. And they essentially own your rights for at least a short period of time, maybe a year or two. And it just takes a lot longer. It could take a year or two. So I could submit that, for example, tomorrow, and it takes up to a year or two to publish a book, as opposed to, in my time frame, I can do it in a couple months in most cases. But anyway, so we're waiting on professional editing. I've got one edit back already, a sample for the prologue, and I'm waiting for one this week. I'll have another editor send me a sample edit for the prologue and chapter 1, and that's what I'm waiting on, kind of compare and see who I want to go with in that situation, and that's kind of what we're waiting on. So in a holding pattern, we're looking at probably around June for an actual release date, but you can pre-order that again on the Indiegogo campaign, or if you join our Patreon community, you automatically have different books as far as the formats built into the tier system. So ebook, paperback, hardback, all that stuff will be available on Patreon as well. So anyway, that's what I wanted to update you really quickly on the writing aspect of things. Oh, and by the way, you can go to my website, chrismchristian.com. That will be in the description below as well, and sign up for our newsletter. I do blog posts. You'll get updates on the Crimson Gods, as well as behind the scenes works in progress, which I've already started as well. So go to the website, sign up for our newsletter, and you'll be the first to know. Let's get to the movie segment. This week's movie I watched The Little Things. This was, of course, released in theaters as well as HBO Max at the same time. I really dug this movie, and I was also slightly agitated at this movie. So I will be spoiling this here. I just want to say that up front. If you hadn't seen it, skip to the next segment or whatever. I watched The Little Things because Denzel is my man. He's always been my man. I don't think he's ever done a bad movie, ever. But this movie is star-studded. You have Denzel, you have Rami Malek, as well as Jared Leto. I mean, you got 3 Academy Award winners in the same movie. So a star-studded movie, and I've loved any kind of true crime-based serial killer stuff, and that's kind of what it is. But it's more about the psychology of the detectives as opposed to getting in the mind of a serial killer. You do a little bit of both. And I think a lot of people were disappointed because I watched a few reactions, or I guess you could say breakdowns or explained videos where people are trying to figure out who the killer is in this movie. So yeah, I think a lot of people are really thinking about okay, they let me down here. I was waiting for a big twist and it never really came. You did get you got kind of a twist there at the end as far as Denzel, his character, and what he actually did in the past. You knew something was going on about his past early on in the movie. You knew he was damaged in some way. You didn't know exactly why, but of course it came out that he was, a detective previously before kind of being a regular, sheriff's deputy again in a different county. Turns out at the end that he accidentally killed one of the girls that he was investigating her disappearance. So he finds 2 bodies, and the third victim was actually his fault. It was an accidental shooting, but the coroner, his friend, as well as his captain, ended up covering it up for him. So he lived with this guilt all these years, and during this whole investigation, he lost everything he had. He lost his family. He got a divorce. He had a major heart attack, apparently. He said triple bypass surgery, and he lost his damn job and stuff, all in the span of 6 months because he was so obsessed with the case and catching this killer. And that's the idea of what's happening with Rami Malek's character, is the kind of the young, new detective on a case that seems to be the same killer. We're not really 100% sure if it is, but it seems to be very similar in their little calling cards or whatever. So he goes down, ends up helping this guy out in this old apartment with all these people that kind of know him, but you're not sure why they don't like him in some cases. So basically, Rami's character is becoming Denzel's character, is essentially the idea. So it gets more into their psychology as opposed to the mind of a serial killer. Now, they all nailed their parts. I thought the acting was outstanding. Jared Leto, man, I'll tell you what, he's outstanding. He nailed this character as well as far as the suspect. We'll just call him the suspect because we don't know. We don't know if he's actually the killer, and that's the problem I think a lot of people have. Now, I didn't mind that so much. I get why people are aggravated because I did want to know, but I think the idea was, let's kind of subvert this trope a little bit and go a different route and let you in on the mind of the detectives as opposed to the minds of the serial killer. Had a 7 feel. Had a 7 feel for sure, no doubt about it. 7 was definitely an influence. You could see here. So if you love 7, then I think you'll like this movie. But again, don't expect to know for sure who actually committed the murders. Now, in my opinion, I'll go ahead and say it here, I don't think that Jared Leto's character was the killer. I just don't think he was. I think it was circumstantial. I think he is exactly as he said he was in the movie, that he was a crime buff. He likes fucking with the cops. In the beginning of this movie, we saw who we assume is the actual killer from the movie, and it definitely was not his character because this girl escaped, and she comes back into the story later to be a witness, try to pick him out from a lineup. But the point being that she escaped, and we saw glimpses of this guy's face, and he did not have a beard. He wore glasses, and Jared Leto's character had a beard and long hair. He had a weird gait about him, kind of drug one of his legs behind him a little bit. He was kind of duck-footed as well, so it definitely was not the same person. So if they showed that person who was driving a completely different car, by the way, it's definitely not him. So what ends up happening is Rami Malek's character, the new detective, I forgot their names besides Denzel's, but he ends up killing this dude by accident at the end of the movie, very similar to what Denzel had done in the past. So very much a parallel with the characters there. He essentially was becoming Denzel, so Denzel helps him cover this thing up. And instead of letting him go crazy, he kind of became the angel on his shoulder and sent him this little hairpiece that he had went and bought from a store from one of the missing girls to let him know that it was the killer, but we don't really know that. Denzel just did that for him, kind of to take his pain away so he could get on with his life and get back to his family and all that kind of stuff, because he was already losing, like, his wife. You could see that. It was definitely some separation going on there. He was so obsessed with the case. And so it's really interesting to go into the mind of the police officers, the investigators, the homicide detectives. So it's a good idea. I dug the movie. I still wanted to know. I think they probably put the killer in there somewhere, but we did not see the same car from the very beginning. We saw the other girl, the jogger, go up the road, and she was, being followed by another car. We assumed that was the killer because she does go missing, but it was not his car. It was just not the same car. So we saw two separate cars. We saw the man's face that wore glasses and was, more clean shaven. And not to mention the fact that actually he turns out that 8 years ago, I believe, before this movie, he had turned himself in and said he was this murderer, and ends up being he was not. He was just one of those people who loves to mess with the police, and he was definitely a crime buff like he said he was. He studied serial killer stuff, but he just wanted to kind of be like them as opposed to actually committing the act. So my opinion, he was definitely not the killer. Anyway, good movie. I know I just spoiled the shit out of it, but if you hadn't seen it, it's still worth watching, definitely. HBO Max, if you already have that, or it's actually out in theaters as well. Anything Denzel cannot be bad. That's just the bottom line. I saw a little bit of hate for this movie, disappointment or whatever. This could be Denzel's worst movie. Sure, maybe it is, but I don't think so. I think it's okay. Although again, I understand their frustration. Serial killer stuff, you definitely want to know who the fuck the killer is. All right, so let's move on and talk about Marvel for a minute. We have WandaVision in full swing now. We just saw episode 4, so I won't get into this too deep because I did a video on this, and as well as the live stream Sunday, we talked about it as well. But I think episode 4 of WandaVision definitely brought people back into the fray. I think they were getting a little bit frustrated with, the sitcom thing from the 50s, 60s, and 70s with, Scarlet Witch and Vision and all that kind of stuff. And they were like, I don't know what's really going on here. It's kind of weird. And I totally get that. But I think episode 4 kind of reeled everybody back in, I'm telling you, because we got back into the Marvel universe. In our reality, so to speak, it was a little more grounded. We saw Sword, we saw Monica Rambeau, all that good stuff. So we see essentially the birth of Photon, I believe, in some sense. We'll see what they do with that. But I believe, at least for the MCU, this may be her origin story. So Monica Rambeau, for those that may not know, just really quickly, she was originally a Captain Marvel, the second Captain Marvel, but she is also known as Photon or Pulsar, so she's definitely going to be Photon. That was her mother, Maria Rambeau's call sign as a captain in the Air Force, which, of course, she was in Captain Marvel. So WandaVision, kind of bringing it back in. We're still not sure what's going on. We know Wanda's controlling most of this, but, of course, as we mentioned in the video and live stream, definitely something else going on. I don't know if they'll go the Mephisto route like they do in the comics. I think the comics are, honestly, they're a little silly with Wanda and her kids, being the twins, which will be definitely the Young Avengers. They're definitely going that direction. And I believe some Doctor Strange tie-ins and going the mutant route as well to kind of reintroduce the mutants to the MCU as far as the whole Fox thing, since they were a separate, entity until Disney bought everything in the fucking world. But there's somebody else in control here, or at least controlling some aspect of it. Somebody's editing that feed, so we know we obviously have the Hydra commercials, we have the Hexagon stuff that kind of relates to AIM in some sense, or we could have Mephisto, which is kind of the Marvel version of the devil in some sense. And I don't know if they'll go that route, because that whole thing in the comics and the House of M and all that with Mephisto was he and Agatha Harkness, which she's definitely there, obviously. That is Agnes, Agatha Harkness, Agnes. She was the witch from the Salem witch trials that at one point in the comics actually helped Scarlet Witch. She kind of mentored her. So are they going with Mephisto? Is it just going to be some Hydra people or some AIM people or some combination of everything? We'll see. I doubt they go that route, because the route was, I don't know if it would make for good TV in the Marvel universe now, as far as her having twins and they're really got the souls of Mephisto. It was this whole weird, kind of silly thing, honestly. So I doubt they'll go that route, but we'll see. We'll see. I think it really pulled people back in, and now we're kind of grounded. They brought back in Agent Woo. We got fucking snarky Darcy back from Thor and all that stuff. So now they're really tying all this together. So this is of course, the kickoff of Phase 4. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm really digging the show right now. And as a matter of fact, I think that Elizabeth Olsen herself basically told us what's going to happen as far as WandaVision a few years ago. Here's this YouTube video. Check this out. I can't play it all, but this is from Allure. And we have Elizabeth Olsen explains the origins of Wanda Maximoff, a.k.a. the Scarlet Witch. Now, this was May 16th, 2016. So this is about 4 years old, obviously. And here we go. She explains what's happening with Scarlet Witch, and this is exactly what we're seeing here as far as WandaVision. So let's check this out. Again, I can't play it all. I don't want to get, a strike here or some bullshit.
I'm about to teach you the history of my Marvel character, the Scarlet Witch.
She does the...
Scarlet Witch first appeared in X-Men #4 in May of 1964, where she and her brother...
Okay, I gotta pause it for a second here.
Their Quicksilver were part of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants.
Yeah, so
right.
She started off as a villain.
Her power is to tap into the mystic powers of the universe, creating reality-disrupting chaos.
From the Mind Stone.
Essentially, she can manipulate cosmic probability. Scarlet Witch then joined...
Okay, so she joins the Avengers.
The Avengers a year later in Avengers #16. And spent the next bunch of years kicking butt with them.
Until...
In 1975, she met the Vision.
Okay, so basically, I won't play this entire thing, but she kind of goes through here and explains a few things. Magneto's her dad.
Vision and the Scarlet Witch, Volume 2, Number 3. Scarlet and the Vision found out it was impossible for a human and an android.
And this is kind of where I think they're, in the story at least, going.
Immaculate conception. She used magic to make herself pregnant and gave birth to twin boys. The Vision had his memory wiped. He and Scarlet got a divorce, and the twins turned out to be shards of the demon Mephisto.
Yeah, so there you go. Anyway, I won't play this whole thing. You get the idea. So she explains all this stuff in some detail here, and so this looks like the direction they're going. So we'll see if they did the Mephisto thing to introduce another big bad in the MCU. I don't know. There's not really any direct signs, but the devil's in the details, right? The devil's in the details. So I haven't looked at it that hard to stop at every little thing and see if there's any signs of Mephisto. So definitely going off the House of M. In other Marvel news, I thought this was really, really cool. We have Black Panther, a new series coming to Disney+. So you see right here, Walt Disney Company has signed a deal with Ryan Coogler for more Black Panther stories. So basically what's going on here from this article is at Deseret.com, I believe. Deadline reports that the deal with Disney and Coogler includes the Black Panther sequel that begins filming later this year. Of course, we all know that. R.I.P. Chadwick Boseman. And will include a new studio show set in the Kingdom of Wakanda. So the idea here, I believe, essentially is that they could go back and show, like you have some tweets here, imagine the Wakanda series as an anthology, and it shows how much of their nation and tech has grown over time. It could show different Black Panthers throughout their history as well. So I think that's a good idea, man. Anything on Wakanda would be cool. So I think that's what they're going to do. Obviously, it can't be kind of a modern day thing. They can tie it in, obviously, depending on what they do with Black Panther 2. And let me know what you think in the comments of what they're going to do with Black Panther. They're not going to recast him. They've definitely said that, and I don't blame them. I don't want them to. I cannot see anybody else as Black Panther but Chadwick Boseman. So I think they're going to have to go ahead and move to Shuri being Black Panther. This is a comic thing as well. They could have done Killmonger, but in my opinion, they should not have killed him in Black Panther, the first one. So obviously that's out. They could maybe bring him back in some way, shape, or form, but I don't think they'll go that route. I think they go ahead and move to his sister Shuri being the next Black Panther. I think that's what they're going to have to do. Unfortunately, obviously, with Chadwick gone now, they have to kind of accelerate the whole timeline a little bit, so and to keep it grounded in the MCU for what they're doing. So they're going to have to explain something in Black Panther 2. Obviously, that will be out before this show, I believe. But I thought it was really cool here that we're going to have a show in Wakanda. And here's, speaking of Black Panther 2, Marvel announced back in August 19 that Black Panther would get a sequel in 2022. And talks about Chadwick Boseman here, obviously. So nobody really knows what they're going to do, but they did say right here, and for that reason, we will not recast the character. So they're definitely not going to recast, according to Kevin Feige. They're not going to recast Chadwick Boseman. And I think in that case, they just move on to Shuri. Don't try to get another in between in there or whatever. Just go ahead and go forward with that. I think it's the best thing to do as opposed to trying to, twist something and try to bring Killmonger back, for example, who could have been a temporary replacement or something if they didn't kill him in the first place. So anyway, I think that's really cool. We'll see what happens. That's a little while off, though, so we'll see what happens. We got to get the movie first. All right, so let's talk about some Star Wars for a second. There's not a lot of Star Wars news going on right now, obviously, with The Mandalorian. We just saw the second season end. Out fucking standing, obviously, with the return of Luke Skywalker in his former glory, like we saw before the trash-ass sequels. So anyway, Star Wars is going in the right direction under Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau. It's fucking outstanding. So I want to just really quickly mention, there was an article here that says that Mandalorian leads into the sequels. Obviously, it has to. But that's kind of a given, so I don't really want to talk about that. What I want to talk about, because basically all he's saying here is the Mandalorian, the showrunner said, need to understand how the show fits in Star Wars timeline, especially as a sequel trilogy is 30 years in the future from when the show takes place. So they're basically saying it, right now it's heading towards the sequel because he's saying the story unfolded as I wrote it. The Mandalorian inherits a great deal from existing Star Wars stories, and when I write, the context is always a consideration. It became clear that within the established continuity, certain things were likely to transpire. And it kind of goes on to say, as for now, it's kind of just moving towards the sequel trilogy. As we have already seen, we've seen this already, so I don't know why this is honestly even an article, because we've already seen the little, the prequel to Snoke or whatever. We've seen the hints from Baby Yoda and his blood and why Moff Gideon needs his blood and all that kind of shit. So the point being that it's heading there for now. But what's interesting here is there's questions about the trilogy, the sequel trilogy. We're talking about the trash Disney woke sequel trilogy, specifically Rian Johnson and The Last Jedi was the worst. And then, of course, even trying to come in and save it just a bit in The Rise of Skywalker, there's nothing they could do to really undo all that. So it just got kind of silly and stupid. But what I found interesting here, and I don't know if this is true, and I'm going to say this is probably bullshit, but there are questions about the sequel trilogy. The Mandalorian could lead to the sequel trilogy, but there are a lot of rumors out there right now about the sequel trilogy being retconned and rebooted. Specifically, the UK tabloid Express reported that Disney is looking to retcon the sequel trilogy so it never happened in the Star Wars timeline. The reboot would happen in a 3-season show, which would focus on each sequel trilogy film per season. Now, that would be pretty damn cool. The problem is you don't have Carrie Fisher. I don't think Harrison Ford would come back. And Mark Hamill, depending on when they start this, he would probably be down for it because he hated the sequel trilogy himself. He said in many interviews, this is not the Luke Skywalker that I played. Anyway, the point being here is I don't think this will happen. I think it's almost like they'd rather spit in the face of their fans before they admit any kind of errors, which they've already basically admitted they had no plan after we said that for many years. The reason I don't think this will ever happen is because Star Wars, there seems to be two camps over there. There seems to be two camps where you have people like Dave Filoni and Favreau who are Star Wars fans. They've obviously grown up and knowing this material. They obviously have, they're interested in the original vision of George Lucas. Now, I agree, George Lucas is not a good director. The prequels were not good movies. The story was there, but it was way too much CGI and all that kind of stuff. But I get it. He's an artist trying to make his world perfect, so I don't mind that aspect of it. Obviously, there were problems with the prequels. We bitched about them when they came out, too. So I don't want to hear any more shit when we bitch about these horrible sequel trilogies because we didn't like the way the prequels went down, but we did like the story was there. The story was there, and it focused on what Lucas's original intent was as opposed to fucking space horses and shit. But anyway, what I'm saying is there seems to be two camps. You got that camp, with the Mandalorian and, Obi-Wan show's coming out. Ahsoka Tano's coming out. They're going to be outstanding under that camp. And then you have the other side that's kind of still defending these movies, Rian Johnson, people like that. I don't know about Kathleen Kennedy. I guess she should get credit for the Mandalorian too, and Ahsoka and whatever else comes out. But at the same time, she's not really involved in those. I mean, she's literally she's the president, so of course her name's going to be on it. So, but she did greenlight it, so I got to give her credit for that. But with these new weird, I haven't even read these comics, these new High Republic comics, people seem to have a lot of issues with them. I saw one issue where one of the new characters, she uses a lightsaber to slide down a tree to catch herself and then stops. And I know it's hard to picture what I'm saying, but that's not how lightsabers work. And at least in that case, the guy who wrote that came out and said, "Yeah, I kind of fucked that one up." At least he came out and admitted it instead of yelling back saying, "No, that's what we wanted to do. This is the High Republic, so things are different," or whatever it may be. "You're wrong, fans, and fuck you," and all this kind of stuff. Basically, like Rian Johnson and all those guys did when people started bitching about the Star Wars sequel trilogies. Which this is what the fandom menace, this kind of loose-knit group of people who just hated the new movies because they destroyed the original idea of George Lucas. That's why that was born, because instead of saying, "You know what, we get it, this is not what, this didn't follow his original story. This was not the old school Luke Skywalker of old, the hero a lot of us looked up to. This was not the same Princess Leia." All these characters. And then they basically just spit in all the fans' faces. If you didn't love it, you were I guess you're a sexist because you didn't like Rey, just because we said it's always been a thing in Star Wars that you have to have training. Even the best, most powerful Jedi, Sith, whatever, have to have training, and she can magically do things overnight. So we had all these issues, and then they just yelled back at the fans and called us all names and whatever, which is completely ridiculous. But now, of course, it comes out that we've all been saying this for years, that they didn't have a plan going through the sequel trilogy. They just kind of went in. It was supposed to be JJ, and he was going to leave, and then Rian Johnson. And so instead of having this whole plan for a 10-year trilogy, at least they had that plan in the prequels, which again were not great movies, but the story was there. It wasn't about some side missions of rescuing space horses and running out of fucking gas. So let's just get that straight. So anyway, I don't think they'll be rebooting a Star Wars show anytime soon. I just don't think they can. Because it would admit defeat, essentially. It would admit that they were wrong, that they screwed it up, and then they did all this shit for political reasons, and I don't know. I don't think, just out of spite, almost, I don't think they would do it. Again, there's been some great stuff from Disney Star Wars. I've acknowledged that in the past, even though I've hated on these movies. But, Rogue One, for example, outstanding. If they can keep all the identity politics out of it and just make good stories, we don't care who they are. I mean, it's just the way it is. And just don't spit in the faces of the people that made you who you are, is all I'm saying. So anyway, on to some Game of Thrones news. Game of Thrones seems to be doing almost a cinematic universe, it seems to be. They've announced now a couple other possible things. I don't know exactly what's confirmed, but it looks like that they've announced Dunk and Egg as far as a prequel, another prequel. Of course, we have House of the Dragon coming next year, so I'm really looking forward to that. Even though I do get the idea of, do you watch this shit? Because if you didn't like the way season 8 ended, it's almost like, what's the point? We know how it goes, where it ends. But Ice and Fire, the Song of Ice and Fire universe is the world is big. There's lots of good stories, a lot of great stories, and Dunk and Egg will be an outstanding choice, I believe. I think we said this when they announced that there'll be, 5 they were looking into. Of course, we got the one they kind of referred to as The Long Night, or George R. R. Martin did. That got kind of canceled after its pilot. And then House of the Dragon, they've already ordered a full season. So we know they're going forward with that, around the Dance of the Dragons, the Targaryen family history, all that. So they've also announced, I believe, an animated series. There's no information on what this animated series could be. I think some people have mentioned that it could be something related to Robert's Rebellion. I would like to see that. I would definitely watch Robert's Rebellion. I think that would be cool. But they also said that probably wouldn't be a thing initially because you kind of know everything you need to know about Robert's Rebellion. And he did say by the time you get, finished with the books, which we'll never get the last book, I'm just betting, we'll definitely get Winds of Winter in the next couple of years. Hopefully, I don't know, next year we'll see. But he's basically saying that by the time you've read the entire Ice and Fire series, you'll know everything you need to know about Robert's Rebellion. So it's not really a point to kind of put it on TV when you will already have known that if you've watched the main show Game of Thrones, you got enough information about it, essentially. or if you've read the books, you have a lot more details on Robert's Rebellion. So I don't know what the animated series is going to be. I would probably watch an animated Game of Thrones series. I don't like a lot of animated series. I watched the Clone Wars and stuff like that, obviously, and I love those. But I just don't get into a lot of animated stuff, cartoons basically, unless it's fucking Tom and Jerry or classic Looney Tunes. But anyway, Dunk and Egg. So Dunk and Egg is really cool. I think it would make a great series because you don't have to worry about so much on. It'll kind of take you away from the main players. You'll still get some of that as far as how Game of Thrones ended, if you didn't like that. If you did, that's fine too. Then you won't have a problem with any of this. But I think this is a good choice for a prequel in this world because it's not too far in the past, but it's also kind of separated enough from the main story as to not focus on, well, shit, we know how this ends. I mean, obviously, it's going to involve some Targaryens, and anything that involves Targaryens, you're going to think about Daenerys, and you're going to think about Jon, and all that stuff. But you're not so much focused on, the politics of the Iron Throne and that type of thing. So Dunk and Egg is set about 90 years, if I remember correctly, before Game of Thrones, and this is going to follow Sir Duncan the Tall. He is a hedge knight, and he ends up with this little kid who shaves his head bald, and he runs around with him as his squire, and ends up being that is Aegon the Fifth Targaryen, who would later become king. So Sir Duncan the Tall is also a descendant of Brienne of Tarth. So that was confirmed, I believe, in season 7 or 8 of Game of Thrones by George R. R. Martin, or during that time period. So I think that's a really good choice. Essentially, the idea, and because you're going to got a lot of different storylines involved. It started with the Hedge Knight, which I believe came out in 1998, I want to say, 98, something like that. Then you had the Sworn Sword, which was early 2000s. And then you had the Mystery Knight, maybe 2009 or 10, maybe, something like that. And they were all combined into a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, which is what most people would probably recognize the book by. So all three of these novellas are combined in one book now, and he had planned on writing more of these. So they're really good, but you're going to deal with Blackfire rebellions that you've probably heard about, at least references to from the show. You're gonna see a younger Bloodraven potentially. I'm sure they would do that storyline. So the old fucking tree wizard, when he was kind of a normal, as normal as he can get, during his reign as Hand of the King. You could potentially see some of that. You're going to see some Dragon Egg stuff, some stolen Dragon Egg things. You'll get some trial by combat. Not only that, you'll get a trial by 7, which I don't know if they mentioned that or referenced that in the main show Game of Thrones. I don't know if a lot of people know, if you didn't, not a book reader, about a trial by 7. You'll see that for sure. That involves Sir Duncan the Tall, who, again, I think maybe I mentioned this, but he will be in the future the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard under Aegon V, his squire. You'll get Aerion and Baelor Targaryen. You'll get Stephen Baratheon, who is the father of Robert Baratheon. You'll get all these characters that maybe there was some nods to or whatever. They didn't really mention some of those in the main show. So yeah, anyway, let's go over here to the little article here on IndieWire. So HBO is in early development of its next Game of Thrones prequel, a series adaptation of George R. R. Martin's fantasy novellas, The Tales of Dunk and Egg. Variety first reported the news, adding, the one-hour show would be based on a series of fantasy novellas by Martin, which follow the adventures of Sir Duncan the Tall and a young Aegon V Targaryen, otherwise known as Egg. If you remember that from the main show, Maester Aemon, this was his brother. This was his brother who got the crown because he decided, you know what, I'm just going to go to the Night's Watch, because he never thought he would be in line for it. So when it came to him, he had already sworn his vows to the Maesters at the Citadel, and then went to the Night's Watch later on with Bloodraven. So at this time, he would be alive as well. But he did reference him when he was sick and dying on the bed. Now he dies it's a little bit different in the books or whatever. He goes to the Citadel with Sam, but he mentions Egg because he had seen Gilly's baby or whatever, and that reminded him of Egg or whatever. So that was his younger brother. And so you would see stuff like that as well. The connections there would be there. There'll be enough connections there to make you think, oh, okay, that's Maester Aemon's brother, and I loved Maester Aemon, to connect it to the parts of the show you loved, but far enough off of the kind of the main thing before there's any rebellions or Danny's born and Jon Snow, any of that kind of main storyline stuff. But anyway, HBO apparently declined to comment when asked about it by IndieWire. Variety adds, Martin has published 3 novellas, Tales of Dunk and Egg, Hedge Knight, Sworn Sword, Mystery Knight, 3 novellas collected. I just said that, The Night of 7 Kingdoms. No showrunner or writer is currently attached to the prequel series adaptation for Tales of Dunk and Egg, although sources tell Variety it is a high priority for HBO as the premium cable looks to build on the success of Game of Thrones. So it goes on to say basically that, they're working on House of the Dragon. We've already know that. Mikhail Sapochnik and Ryan Condal being the showrunners there. So it looks like they're trying to do basically almost a cinematic universe, almost like Marvel. So we're going to have, Westeros world basically and all these different shows throughout different time periods. So I think it'll go over well. I think you're going to attract some of that audience back. I know there are a lot of people that say, fuck it, I don't want to see it. I didn't like season 8. I don't care about the prequels because I know how it ends. Or, fuck them. They screwed it up. They ruined my life. They broke my YouTube channel, whatever the hell it may be. So I get that. But I think, once it starts rolling up and you see some teasers and then you see some trailers drop and, maybe some footage or whatever, or maybe some on-set photos, I think it'll pull some people back. So if they can get this world going with that same production value as GOT, I think it's a good idea. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm excited about it. I'll definitely watch it. I still have issues, obviously. I will never get over season 8 of Game of Thrones, technically the last couple seasons, but just the way they did it, whether it ends that way in the books or not, I think the main points will, obviously. I've said that in many videos. But it was just done horribly, rushed, whatever. And I personally don't like that ending. Even if it was done great and Danny slowly went mad over time or whatever it may be, and Jon, chose to go beyond the wall himself and Bran becomes king, some of that's fine. And I get the idea of what Martin's trying to do there. But personally, I just don't like that ending. I didn't want it to be all sunshine and roses and shit like that, but I didn't want it to be all just dumb. Anyway, so that's the news, ladies and gentlemen, for the first episode of The Smoke Break. Let me know what you think in the comments below. We had, Marvel stuff, WandaVision. We have a Black Panther series coming. Robert's Rebellion or The Hedge Knight? Which one you want to see first in the Game of Thrones cinematic universe or whatever they're going to call it, if they actually come up with a name. I'm just using that, myself for now. Would you like to see a Star Wars reboot of the sequels to just kind of erase that from our memories? I don't think that'll ever happen. I think that almost out of spite, I don't think they'd ever do that. But we also had, The Little Things on HBO Max or in theaters. Denzel Washington, one of my favorite all-time actors, top 5 easily. And he just can't make a bad movie, but I do get some of the criticism of this movie. I do get the, because you do want to know. I personally wanted to know. And although there is, again, a good little twist as far as his personal background, you kind of knew that was coming. You figured out you was going to learn what had happened to him. But I don't think, in my opinion, that this guy, Jared Leto, played was the killer. I think it was an accident just the same way Denzel's was, too. So anyway, guys, let me know what you think in the comments below. If you like this style of video, that I can, do this almost a mini podcast on different fandoms all in one time, and then perhaps chop them up or whatever. We'll see. Let me know in the comments. Give me a like, and do me a favor. And as we try to reverse this whole thing and try some different things here, we're going to go back to some more live streaming as well. But hit that subscribe button if you don't mind. If you dig what I do here, please give these videos a like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that damn subscribe button as we try to save this channel. Also, a huge shout out to my supporters on Patreon. I really appreciate the support. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.